Hey guys, welcome back to Declassified. I hope we're all having a great week so far. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is imposter syndrome, which seems a little funny to say. It's not that I love this feeling, but I preach about it a lot because I truly feel like we're thinking about it the wrong way. So many of us experience this. I've talked about it plenty with business owners and friends who've experienced it as well. I've ranted about it a lot on my Instagram stories, so you guys know that I'm passionate about helping others overcome this and channeling it for good. So today we're going to talk about my views of imposter syndrome, how personally I've experienced this, and how you can channel it for good use because it doesn't have to be viewed as a bad thing. And I actually think when you feel this, it's actually a good sign, which is kind of a unique perspective to have on the matter, especially when there's so much noise on the internet giving us tips and advice to either like fight it off or get rid of it, like it's some sort of evil that just lives inside of us that we have to expel or exercise. And I'm just like over here, sitting here like, guys, there is no cure for this. It's a simple feeling, and I just want us to stop giving it so much power. Now, I will say if you experience this and it's rooted in deep anxiety, like crippling anxiety, then you have to deal with that, and that's a whole separate topic. But if you do have bad anxiety, please seek the help of a professional. There are so many great therapists out there who can help you and would love to help you. And I will actually link in the show notes a company that I use. I have found a great therapist, a Christian based company as well. So if you're local to the St. Louis area, I cannot recommend them enough. But feeling a small amount of imposter syndrome is okay. It can actually be a good sign for you. It can even prove that you are on the cusp of something great because typically when we question our abilities, it's when we're faced with something new. It's stepping into a new project, a new business, a new role or position. So, in my opinion, imposter syndrome just signifies that you're exactly where you need to be. And if I'm being truthful, which I told you guys I would be real with you guys, anytime in my life where I've either excelled or accomplished something, I've always just been like slightly underqualified, riding that line between having the potential and just lacking a little bit of experience. And well, yes, that's a very uncomfortable place to sit in. I get it. There's anxiety there, there's questioning there, but you're going to have to learn to silence those inner thoughts because your imposter syndrome is just showing you that you have something new to learn. And I want you guys to pocket that for now because we're going to unpack that here in a second. Learning is the answer. But before we dive in, I want to talk about the definition first in case anyone doesn't know, which if you don't know what this word is, I feel like you might be living under a rock because this has become such a buzzword nowadays. And I feel like that's just a testament to how prevalent it is in our society today. Imposter syndrome is defined as the persistent inability to not believe in your own achievements. You can even undervalue the success you've already have. It's common to feel this even when you feel like you've quote unquote made it or have some stability in your career. You may feel like you got to a level you haven't earned, or you're in groups that you feel like you're too small to be a part of. The perfect storm had to happen to magically create your business that you're just running off of a fluke. Does this sound familiar to anyone? What's crazy to me is that some of the most successful people have experienced this phenomenon. Emma Watson, for one, Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks was actually quoted saying that self-doubt is a high wire act that we all walk. And if my man Tom Hanks, who has won Academy Awards, multiple Emmys, and is worth whatever millions of dollars, experiences this too, it's not just me. It's not just you. We all doubt ourselves sometimes, and that just tells me that this is a universal feeling. It's just part of being human, which kind of takes the pressure off, right? But it starts to become a problem when we let these feelings become unchecked and we don't use them as motivation for growth, but instead we let those internal fears, what's happening on the inside of us, to start affecting our outside behaviors. They even start to dictate our actions. And in that instance, imposter syndrome can become a self-fulfilling prophecy because you sit there and you tell yourself that you're not worthy and that you're not capable, and thus you start to believe those thoughts and you never act. And if we further entertain those thoughts, they can have lasting effects on our productivity. We may even procrastinate. It can paralyze people from taking any action or initiative when it comes to their dreams because they're always waiting for that perfect moment, or they feel like they're never perfectly ready, which, guys, you're never going to be 100% ready for anything. Are there any perfectionists out there? Hi. I relate. Like, I am one of those people. I struggle to not be in that club myself because perfectionism can be a double edged sword. By all means, try to be the best version of yourself. But I want you guys to remember that perfectionism can paralyze you. It can keep you from moving forward. It can keep you from trying new things because you're scared of failure. Or there's even thinking that why start something because there's somebody already out there doing it and they're doing it better than you. Like, it creates a loop of negative self talk that can make us hesitant to pursue our goals and share new ideas with people and even answer our God given calling. I'm a firm believer that God has a calling for each and every one of us and that everyone has God given talents, and we're supposed to use those talents for good in the world, to serve others and to glorify His kingdom. It's not to question our abilities. So for me, that calling is being a photographer and being an educator. And if God has placed a desire in your heart to do more, to be more, who are we to question Him? He who is capable of far more than we could ever hope or dream. We should never, never shrink ourselves down from His calling, even when we don't believe in ourselves. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I do believe there is a dimension out there where if we don't answer God's calling on our hearts, He will work through somebody else. So if you sit on something, someone else is going to take it. Whether it's inviting someone out or asking your boss for a raise, if you don't act, I can promise you someone else is going to step to the plate. But perfectionism and getting inside our heads isn't the only thing that can exacerbate imposter syndrome. The fear of failure can also hold us back. But you know what's scarier than failing, guys? Having regrets or looking back on your life and feeling like you missed opportunities. I promise failing is not the worst case scenario. And who cares if it doesn't work out? I would bet you my right arm that if you make a mistake or fail, you're still going to come out on the other side a winner because you'll become stronger in the process. You'll have learned something in the process. So failure is not something to be afraid of. And I have a feeling it's going to be preached on this podcast a lot. Trying and failing is not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is not even attempting, not even giving yourself the opportunity to fail, the opportunity to learn. In my opinion, you stand way more to lose by never even trying. There's a whole experience that you're missing out on. I think about my own photography career and what my world would look like if I had allowed my feelings of self-doubt to prevent me from ever picking up a camera. I wouldn't be sitting here as a business owner with a stable career and a reputable name. I even think about starting this podcast and its potential. I don't know where it'll take me. I have no idea if it will resonate with people, but the only way that I can know is to hit record, to take the risk and start talking. Is it scary? Absolutely. Yes, this is absolutely terrifying. Have I messed up and had to rework or re-record a few things? Yes, but scary or not, I'm still alive. It hasn't killed me yet. And regardless of where this podcast takes me, I can guarantee you that I'm going to grow in this process and it's going to teach me something that will ultimately help me grow as a person. So that's what I want you guys to focus on. Instead of what could go wrong, ask yourself what you can learn. So what does this look like? Maybe you're an artist and you want to make music, but you don't have anything out on Spotify. So you never put pen to paper, which just reinforces you feeling like a fraud around your peers who may be a couple steps in front of you. Or maybe you got invited to a speaking engagement to talk about the success of your business, but you're terrified of public speaking and wondering, why on earth would anyone want to hear from me? The first time I ever experienced imposter syndrome was when I made the switch from graphic designer to full-time photographer. Here I was, throwing away 4 years of college and 10 years working in the industry as a designer, all down the drain. I mean, I had a degree, this fancy little piece of paper that said who I was. No one could argue with the fact that I was a graphic designer, and to just completely pivot into a new career at the time, it felt like a death wish. I mean, who the heck did I think I was to be calling myself a photographer? Someone who didn't know how to use my camera and what all the little buttons did. I had no idea how to pose, no idea how to run a business, and holy cow, did I just feel like a fish out of water. I had zero experience taking photos, let alone photographing one of the most important days of somebody's life. To this day, I even remember how embarrassed I felt creating my new Instagram account for my photography business. this. And I just remember thinking to myself, everyone is going to laugh at me and they're going to think this is so dumb. They're going to say that I wasted my college education, so much money, and that I can't make a living with photography. I thought things like, I'm probably not going to get any followers or book any clients. Like all these things ran through my head. But I'm glad I didn't listen to that little voice of self doubt, because I could potentially at this moment be sitting behind another desk working another 9 to 5, just completely unfulfilled and miserable. But instead, I channeled those feelings of self doubt as motivation. I opened my company and owned my new title of beginner photographer, and I just ran with it. And I spent that first year being a beginner and learning everything I could. I spent countless hours staying up late on my computer researching. And 6 years later, I photographed just under 200 weddings. There have been other stages in my life where I felt this, and I want to normalize this for you guys. It's mostly in my career and in my business life, but sometimes imposter syndrome can creep into our personal lives as well. It's not just career focused. I remember buying my first house and just feeling so completely underqualified to make a good decision. I remember taking my dad to all the showings with me because I had no idea how to determine whether a hot water heater was up to code or not, or if the roof was considered too old. Even going into our fertility clinic and starting the IVF process to become a new mom had me feeling just out of place. I found myself asking questions like, am I cut out for this? Am I going to be a good mom? I know nothing about how to care for a baby. Am I too old? So much self-doubt. Anyone feel like an imposter at church sometimes? Maybe you feel like you don't belong or that you're not as righteous as the others sitting in your pew, but I'm here to say that that's normal. And even though we know God loves us unconditionally, it's easy to feel unworthy sometimes. We're only human. Even sitting in front of this microphone has me feeling like an imposter, but at this point in my life, I'm smarter to know to not listen to that. And I know that putting myself in uncomfortable situations is good for me. I think about the fitness world, and I'm by no means a fitness expert, but in the same way we have to step into things that our bodies are physically not ready for, we have to do that in order to push ourselves to grow. So for instance, I used to be a really big distance runner, but I didn't just go out and run 12 miles one day. I started with one, and then I worked myself up to 3, and then I worked my endurance up to run those 12 miles. And I remember when I first started, that first mile freaking sucked, but the more I did it, the easier it got. Then 3 miles became easy, 5 miles became easy, and it's just like life. It's just like business. Whatever you're stepping into, we have to condition ourselves and know that you're not going to be an expert overnight or gain all the skill sets you could potentially need in the blink of an eye. Are we seeing a common thread here? Can you relate to any of this in your own life? People tend to feel imposter syndrome when they're starting something new. It's when we're just about to level up. Truthfully, it's simply the disconnect we feel between our current position and our potential. It's where our challenge meets our skill sets. And that's a great place to be, because that gap between our challenge and our current skill set, that's where growth happens. And that's a beautiful place to be. You never want it to be the opposite, where your skill set outweighs your challenge. That just creates boredom and a life without any fulfillment. And what's even more special is we have the ability to choose whether we want to bridge that gap or not. And this is where we're going to flip your imposter syndrome and channel it for good, because if you do decide to bridge that gap to meet your new challenge, it's really simple. All we have to do is embrace the learner's mentality. I know it's groundbreaking stuff, guys, but I'm being so serious. Learning is the answer here. This feeling of inadequacy that you're experiencing is just showing you that you have something new to learn, a new skill to pick up, a new experience to walk through. We're not born with all the answers, and I don't know about you, but for me, that's a really freeing feeling, because we don't have to be overnight experts. We can walk through new situations and learn as we go, just like everybody else. And guess what, guys? That's called life. We're always going to be growing and evolving as human beings. There's always going to be new rules and obstacles at every stage of life. I mean, think back to how many versions of yourself that you've been: a new student, a new parent, a new employee, your first promotion. Considering all of this and how far you've come, this will help you take stock of all your skill sets that will push you forward to that next level that lies ahead and your next set of challenges. I think about my own career path: college student, graphic designer, photographer, educator, switching from advertising to photography. It was really hard. Shooting my first wedding, that was really scary. Even speaking on stage for the first time was absolutely terrifying. But there is one example in my life where I let my imposter syndrome get the best of me, and not many people people know this about me or know this story, but when I was a graphic designer, I was still working my 9 to 5. I was taking some coding classes at a local college, and I ended up developing a really good relationship with my professor. And she would end up offering me an opportunity to teach with her for one of her classes as kind of a sub in a couple times a week. And the class would be after my 9 to 5 job. So I would just drop in after work, teach for that hour, and go home. I was so excited for this opportunity, but I was also extremely terrified. I had never taught anything before. My experience prior to that was just being a teacher's assistant in the computer lab in my college. So the idea of speaking in front of a classroom of students and creating an entire lecture just felt like self induced torture. And I would end up not going back to teach a second class. And guys, think of the skill sets that I didn't pick up because I didn't force myself to walk through that experience. I might be sitting here with just a tinge bit more confidence in regards to public speaking, and that is something that I'm still working on to this day. So maybe you want to start a business, but you don't know how to run a team. Like, who the heck cares? Create an LLC anyways and pick up a management book. You don't have to know all the answers before you start. You just have to know the first few. I mean, here I am recording podcast episode like 5 or 6. I don't even know what episode number this is, but here you go, guys. Like, real life example and how you don't have to know all the answers before you start. Do I know what episode 80 or 100 looks like? No, absolutely no idea. I still don't know how I'm going to do remote interviews just yet, but guess what? I'm going to do the work and I'm going to figure it out. Just like your year one in business isn't going to look like year five, and those year one problems won't be the same as year five problems. But by embracing learning, it takes the pressure off and we can break our goals down into these small steps instead of being overwhelmed by the big, daunting picture. Instead, we need to set clear learning goals. So determine what this looks like for you. What do you want to learn and why is it important? Do you want to be a better speaker? Are you trying to make a name for yourself in the real estate world? Do you maybe want to be a pro athlete? Figure out what your learning goals are and then what skills you need to improve upon, and then take action. Don't get me wrong, like, your success and your effort, they go hand in hand, but there are so many different ways to educate ourselves nowadays. We literally have the world at our fingertips with our smartphones and our devices. So find mentors in your field that you look up to, follow them. Are they on YouTube? Binge the crap out of their content. I've watched hours upon hours of behind the scenes videos of photographers. Even as I was creating this podcast, I've watched so many videos to educate myself. I often joke that I'm a student of YouTube continued education because it's basically how I learned photography. No joke, I did not pick up a single camera in college. I did not take a single photography class. I'm 100% self-taught through the power of the internet. And there's other avenues you can utilize as well. There are podcasts, you can invest in an educational course or hire a mentor, read a book. Like, there are so many things. You can attend workshops and conferences, which I highly recommend because you're going to meet people that are like-minded and you're going to meet them face to face, which is always king. Face to face meetings. But whatever the avenue, set the goal, then experiment and practice, rinse and repeat. And that's pretty much been my process for anything I've ever wanted to accomplish or achieve in my life. And my photography career was no different. I became obsessed with learning everything I could about photography. Like I said, I was watching YouTube videos about everything. I was learning about the exposure triangle. I studied off camera flash. I was watching behind the scenes videos of photographers and learned how they pose their clients and the verbiage they use to direct them and to make them feel comfortable. And I would even research the gear they used. I binged podcasts about best practices to stand out on social media, the best post processing workflow. So much went into me trying to learn my new craft, this new skill, and my new challenge that I was trying to meet. And as I learned, I began incorporating it into my business. I remember even going to my first portrait session and being so anxious and stressed about how the session would turn out. But to fight those feelings, I just armed myself with a plan. I literally would write down at least 4 or 5 poses on a piece of paper to remember, and I would like keep that piece of paper in my back pocket so I wouldn't just get into the session and draw a blank. I would even jot down camera settings on the palm of my hand, like my base camera settings that I knew I could jump off of. And sometimes I'd even arrive early or drive by the location the day prior to scout for the best lighting, which makes me laugh now because I just go into sessions and it's kind of like second nature for me. Like I adjust my camera without even thinking about it and direct my clients and interact with them more like a dance routine that I've memorized by heart. But I didn't just always walk in that confidence. There was a learning curve, but you just have to embrace it and immerse yourself into whatever it is. Learn it, digest it, and eventually it will become your own. You just have to arm yourself with a plan, with new knowledge. And for me, that was the tech side of my camera gear and posing and directing my clients. And it's the same thing for whatever you're learning, whether it's a new camera system or a new language, even. If you want to learn Chinese, you're probably going to learn faster living in China and being immersed in the culture. And that can be said for learning anything new. And eventually it clicked. The more I learned, the more I felt better, the more I owned my identity of being a photographer. So instead of questioning yourself, simply embrace the learner's mindset, ask questions, and stay curious. Introduce yourself to someone you look up to in your field. Some of my best industry friends have been from a new introduction at a networking event or just a simple DM. In your life, you will walk into rooms where you feel like you don't belong, but remember that those people that you admire in your industry, they were once beginners too, and you can soak up so much invaluable knowledge from those who have already walked in the path that you aspire to. You are not an imposter as a beginner, and it's not that you can't do what they're doing, it's just that you haven't yet. Any listeners attend the women's conference I co hosted last year? What many people don't realize is that we started planning that conference without a single ticket purchase. I mean, we had no idea anyone would even show up, literally. I even remember that first meeting that we had inside a local coffee shop, and I was just sweating bullets jumping into something that I knew nothing about. I had never hosted anything before. Sure, I had photographed events and had event experience because of the wedding world, but being a co host and organizing a conference and speaking on stage was not an identity that I was comfortable with. Could we have failed? Sure. Was it perfect? No, but it was definitely impactful. And I'm so glad that we pushed forward and did what we said we were going to do, because I still have so many women come up to me today who are still so thankful for that experience because they either made a new business connection or they made a new friend at the event. And I just love that. So, in the end, despite it all being scary and how unqualified I felt being on stage with women who I saw as powerhouses, it was so worth it, even if it had only impacted one person. But we kicked butt and we had a really successful event. In fact, 100 women in total attended, which completely exceeded our expectations. And we partnered with so many amazing vendors and business owners. We literally created something out of nothing. And it reminds me of this quote that says, if you weren't ready, you wouldn't have the opportunity. And I just want us to soak that in for a second. That short sentence holds so much meaning. It's saying that opportunities are often presented to those who possess the potential to see them. It's where your skill set is just slightly under your challenge. And there's a certain readiness that's inside of all of us based on our own unique backgrounds and skill sets and personalities. So instead of questioning why the opportunity has come your way, just ask what you can learn from it and lean into that and know that you have the ability and the choice to bridge that gap. And you never know, you might just create magic. And if I can do it, so can you. So moving forward, we're all just going to embrace being a learner. Just like my man Tom Hanks said, we're all riding this fine line. So you might as well be on the road labeled continuous learning. But I don't want to just leave you guys with a new mindset. I also want to give you an actionable piece of advice that you can apply today, because sometimes changing the way we think about things doesn't just happen overnight. It's a new muscle that you're going to have to flex a few times before you develop a new habit in your thought process. So to help reinforce this new way of thinking, we're going to focus on the facts of what we've already done, because sometimes we can get so much in our heads that we neglect to remember all the things that we've already accomplished. And I'm willing to bet there are areas in your life where you have succeeded or where you are an expert. So I want you guys to get out your phones, open up your notes app, and write down all your strengths and things that you're proud of. And if you're driving and listening, maybe wait and do this at home. I'm definitely not going to be here sitting and condoning texting and driving. But write these down to remind yourself. And we're going to pin this note to the top of your notes app so you can look at it whenever you need that reminder and that confidence boost. So write down anything that you're proud of, your strengths, awards you've won, any recognitions. Did you graduate with honors? Did your business just hit six figures for the first time last year? And if that's true, that's amazing. And you should be so proud. Did you officially open your LLC? Like whatever you feel proud of, just write it down. For me, this exercise is really grounding and kind of helps me get out of my head because I think sometimes we can be our own worst critics, and it's important to focus on facts over our feelings. It's choosing to look at the proof of our capabilities and not the lies that we tell ourselves in our heads. So just think of this as your unofficial resume and look at it whenever you start to question yourself, because when you focus on what you haven't done and all your shortcomings, you fail to focus on what you have done. So that's it for me, guys. That's my rant on imposter syndrome. I really hope this episode has helped someone. And if anything, I hope it just makes you realize that things don't have to be scary. And when we think about it in terms of what we could learn, it opens the door to our potential. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you guys with a poem. It's one of my favorites, and I've shared it a lot on my stories. It's by Rachel H., and I could not find her last name, so don't come after me if I got the author wrong. It's called The Garden That You're Growing. You're looking in the mirror and you don't like what you see. You're nothing like the person that by now you thought you'd be. And the voices in your head start telling you those lies. So now there's a tremor in your lip and tears inside your eyes. They tell you about the others who are so much better than you, and you've heard it enough times that you start to believe that it's true. That everything you've worked to be and everything you've made, when put against another life, just all begins to fade. But oh, you need to wipe your eyes to see things as they are. A life of your own making should never be put on par. And their grass just may be greener, but that is not worth knowing, for the greenest grass cannot compare to the garden that you are growing. I just love that poem. It's such a beautiful reminder that our reality and what we experience in the world is directly correlated to our mindset, that little voice inside our heads. So you might as well train that inner voice to be a nice one. I always say, talk to yourself like you're your own best friend. You are enough. You are worth it. And it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. So don't compare your journey to anyone else's, because it's true. Comparison is the thief of joy. And if you're too busy looking over the fence at someone else's garden, you're just leaving yours unkept. And the most important garden to keep is your own. So just put your head down and do your own thing. And I promise you're going to be so much more happier and more successful when you stop questioning yourself and comparing your journey to someone else's journey. And eventually it'll get easier because you'll start to build that muscle and your self-confidence will start to increase. And I promise you, the world needs your magic. So please just don't hold yourself back, guys, and just embrace learning and remind yourself that you don't have to have all the answers right away. So that's it for me. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.